Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am from Prentiss Institute in Prentiss, Mississippi. Today is Wednesday, March 14th, 2012. I am Rosie L. Hawthorne Hooker, born November 15, 1923, in Jefferson Davis County. I am the mother of 4 children and raised 1 grandson. Prentiss Normal and Industrial Institute, motto, see no hills. In the early years of 1900, there was a person born in Pike County, Mississippi, a graduate from the high school in Pike County. After graduation, he enrolled in Alcorn A&M College, where he graduated as valedictorian of his class. This person was J.E. Johnson. It was in the year of 1904 when J.E. Johnson married Bertha LaBranch, a graduate of Tuskegee Institute, under the leadership of the late Booker T. Washington, president. Mrs. Johnson's dream was to go to Africa as a missionary. However, Professor Johnson informed her that there were Africans in Mississippi to provide plenty of work for her. Professor and Mrs. J.E. Johnson came to Prentiss, Mississippi, the county seat of Jefferson Davis County, in search of their dream. Their dream was to provide educational opportunities for Negro boys and girls so they could develop spiritually, mentally, and physically. Their belief even then was no child should be left behind. Their desire for them was to become productive and responsible citizens in the community. The question was asked, if the school become a reality, what would it be named? Mrs. Johnson, a graduate of Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, suggested to name the school Prentiss Normal and Industrial Institute. Her suggestion was approved. Prentiss Normal and Industrial Institute was founded in May 1907. Professor and Mrs. Johnson were looked upon with distrust by the Negro race as well as the white race. They had no money, and their only worldly possessions were their clothing and 2 children. A small plot of land about 1 mile east of the town of Prentiss, consisting of only an antebellum home, was secured by Professor Johnson. This plot of land was purchased with borrowed money from the local bank, and Mr. Leon Tyrone was president. A group of Negro farmers endorsed the note. This was the beginning of a long and hard struggle. The school had to be sold to both races, black and white. About 40-day students was enrolled the first year with 4 or 5 boarders. Of course, the beginning was there were elementary schools. Some of the instructors were Mrs. Leela Watts, Mrs. Stella Mae Page, and Mrs. Sangadere Laird. Money had to be raised to make payment on the mortgage and to meet other immediate needs. Thus, Prentiss Normal and Industrial Institute was born under these humble circumstances. In 1909, the Johnsons, as previously stated, was having a very difficult time with taking care of the most immediate needs. Tuition was very low, just $70 a semester. My mother gave us a rooster, my brother and I, to carry for tuition, and the kitchen had rooster soup that night for supper. Not only that, my brother and I walked 8 miles a day, going to school for a year through rain and all kind of difficult weather. The next year, Mr. Leon Tyrone had a bus to pick up the children beginning at New Hebron, Mississippi. And many days the bus was broken down and we still had to walk the 8 miles. Professor Johnson was a man of vision. He saw the need for farmers to be trained how to better produce the things grown on the farm. In 1912, Professor Johnson contacted the U.S. Department of Agriculture to help the farmers. The U.S. Department heard his call and placed the first county agent on Prentiss campus. This man was named Mr. Hubert. The county agent also taught the agricultural teachers of Prentiss Institute to raise produce to feed those students living on campus. This project expanded the vocational curriculum. Professor Johnson came up again with one of his vision. He saw need to prepare teachers to become better trained to teach children. By the grace of God, with meager finance, in 1931, the junior college department was added. Many teachers accepted his appeal to them, and many enrolled and attended classes in the afternoon and on Saturdays. The accomplishment was beyond his imagination. In the early 40s, the Mississippi State Federation of Colored Women's Club met on the Prentiss Institute campus with Mrs. J.E. Johnson, president. The purpose of the meeting was to teach women of their places in their communities, in local and federal government, voter registration, and being an example to others. Women were in attendance from most of the 82 counties in Mississippi. Mrs. Gaston from Birmingham, Alabama, was guest speaker at one of those meetings, at that meeting. The motto of the Mississippi State Federation was, or still is, lifting as we climb. The veteran program was brought to Prentiss Institute in 1944. The purpose of the program was to train veterans and any other student interested in the trades that were being prepared for veterans and others. The program provided both theoretical and practical application for the participant. It was 1951, through the Bureau of Community Affairs, buildings for teaching trades were built. Those trades were shoe repairing, cleaning and pressing, brick masonry, photography, auto mechanic, and business. Also included was agricultural and academics. Certificates were issued upon completion of any trade. This program continued through 1970. Rosie L. Hooker served as secretary of the veteran program. In 1953, attorney Onette W. Johnson son of Professor and Mrs. J.E. Johnson, was traveling from Prentiss to Chicago. He noticed a pamphlet on the train posted by the Church of the Brethren with information about Heifer Project. He noticed immediately that they were serving Heifer Project International, and Attorney Johnson recognized the possibility for his state of Mississippi. As he prepared to leave the train, he overheard a group in the station talking about Heifer Project. From that group, he surprisingly met the executive director, who was Mr. Thurl Metzger. After several meetings and communication, the dream became a reality. Mrs. J.E. Johnson was elected president after the death of her husband, and she spent much of her time making telephone calls and other communication to get this Heifer Project program going approved. In 1955, the program became a reality. A huge transfer truck was driven on Prentiss Institute campus with a load of heifers for the campus and the community. The project provided wholesome produce to students on campus as well as in the community. We were also blessed with chickens and pigs. There was plenty of milk, butter, and meat for the students and community. Rosie L. Hooker was a secretary who issued the first contract to the family receiving the first cow. There was a notable woman, Mrs. Dorothy Heights, an educator, civil rights activist, and an author. She had the inspiration for her own initiative, the Pig Bank. Her desire was that those families who received a pig promised not to sell, but give back 2 piglets from each litter to deposit in the bank. After the death of Professor Johnson in 1954, Mrs. J.E. Johnson was elected elevated to the office of president by the Board of Trustees. She served until 1970. After her death, her son, Mr. A.L. Johnson, took the office and served until about 1980. After Mr. Johnson, the power was turned over to Mr. Sidney James, who was a teacher on campus, who at that time was Director of Special Services. Mr. James served until 1987, and the grandson of the founder, Onett W. Johnson Jr., took the reins as president of Prentiss Institute. Mr. and Mrs. Wallace Ish came to Prentiss from our way to direct the program, Heifer Project. The program grew, and approximately 300 cows were distributed to 4 counties in Mississippi. The year of September 1959 marked a significant change at Prentiss Normal and Industrial Institute. Prentiss Institute was the only high school except Carver High School that had its beginning in 1954, Bassfield, Mississippi. The Jefferson Davis County School Board assumed the responsibility of establishing and maintaining a high school for Negroes in the Prentiss area. The land was purchased from the junior college for the site. It is located about a quarter of a mile from Prentiss Institute campus. After this, the high school was built and named J.E. Johnson High School. The junior college and other programs experienced much growth in the midst of 1960. There were more than 150 students to graduate from junior college and trade courses. When the junior college was operating total on its own, it was necessary to appeal for support from alumni, private donors, and friends to keep the institution afloat. In 1968, a building project for a new library was launched. Dr. Ruby E. Stutz-Lyles gave the first donation. There were other donors for matching funds. The library was named Ruby E. Stutz-Lyles. The next project was a cafeteria. The Alumni Association and friends supported the construction with their finances in 1972. Mr. William, known as Bill Crosby, made many trips across the United States raising funds to help with the construction. It was completed and served the student and the community. In 1973, the junior college expanded its physical plant and curriculum. The college received a grant from HEW, Health, Education, and Welfare, which consisted of personnel, instructional material, and equipment. The year of 1974, the Institute saw the need to remodel buildings, need for a science laboratory, and a lecture hall or theater. A grant was received from the National Science Foundation for the building project. The project also had the possibility for the school to establish a media center. The junior college entered into the cooperative education program where students can expand college education with practical experience. The junior college also received a grant from the state to organize and operate a child development technical project. Mrs. Mellison Guy Dunham, a teacher at Alcorn College, came to Prentiss Institute as a teacher, organized a Black Women's Conference. This conference was organized to inform Black women of their rights in local, state, and national government. People came from various sections of America. Some in attendance were Dr. Willie Latham Taylor, Dr. Ruby Stutz-Lyles, Dr. Redmond, Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, Mrs. A.G. Gaston from Birmingham, Dr. Eva Hall Harris, and other women came from Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Chicago, Alabama, and many were in attendance from all across the state of Mississippi. The campus was filled with women at this conference. Prentiss Normal and Industrial Institute was founded May 1907. In the beginning, their purpose was to train Negroes as well as adults to improve themselves spiritually, mentally, and physically, so they could become good citizens. There were also, at one time, several white students who came to junior college at Prentiss Institute. We feel that Professor and Mrs. Johnson accomplished most of what they set out for. However, in 1989, the institution was closed. After the closing of the institute, the Board of Trustees continued to meet and discuss what can the campus be used for. Mr. R.C. Page, chairman of the Board of Trustees, because of illness, had to resign and move out of the state in Virginia. Mr. C.J. Ducksworth, vice chairman, became the chairman. Mr. Duckworth's life was not very long after Mr. Page. Before Mr. Page left, he recommended that Rosie Hooker become the new chairman. Rosie Hooker declined several times because she did not feel that she could meet the responsibility of Prentiss Institute, but finally accepted. The first meeting with the board to discuss cleaning up the campus because it was now completely grown up. We, the board, decided to clean the campus. After that, the first move was to repair the building where the school was founded. The board continued to make improvement to other buildings on the campus. The little theater, the library, the science building, the auditorium as is under construction at this time. And after 2 or 3 applications to Archives and History, an application was finally approved to repair the Rosenwald building. Presently, the building is approximately 90% complete. Thank you.